Welcome everybody, episode 5, talking today about Django Unchained.
So we're back with some leadership nuggets, this time from Django Unchained. I must declare that I'm a huge fan of Tarantino, and I think he's one of the greatest directors. As you mentioned, like his movies, they all have almost, I mean, they actually all have a lot of blood and shooting and fighting and either Western type shootings or karate or martial arts, like in Kill Bill and other stuff.
Yes.
But like you wouldn't consider like traditionally Django like as an example of a leadership movie, but as you mentioned, when you look at it through this new perspective, I think it's troubling, first of all, like the things that I saw there, and if you think about it, that they really existed at some point, it's like really moving, like it's disturbing.
Yeah.
So the first thing you see when the movie starts is this apparently harmless white man in carriage, and we find out that he actually has a goal to I don't know if he had the goal from the beginning to free Django or to use him as a partner, or not use him in a bad way, but propose him as a partner and free him and all that. But you could see from the beginning that he was different than the other white men, right? Because the other white men were just blending in with the whole population of extreme slavers, and they consider the slaves like nothing, and this is like the troublesome part that when you look at the movie, you feel the pain and you feel like how bad that was, right, for that.
Yeah.
But you can see the difference, because the white men were just they were considering they were carrying like animals, and he was actually talking to them and like human beings and like equals in a way. And the first mention about this difference is like when one of the slavers said, "Don't talk to him like that," like he's an equal, like he means something, and you can see that difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That stood out, and just that idea of, and I think where you're going with this is really just the idea of leadership, of regardless of position, title, whatever it may be, it's important to treat everyone as equals, treat everyone with respect and kindness, and value and all of that. And so, yeah, I mean, that right there was just this, and being clear in that, like, he wasn't afraid to act in accordance of that, or felt like he had to match these slavers. He instead was clear, and this is what I believe, and this is how I feel, and this is how I'm going to treat people.
Exactly, that's a very good point. And like as a leader, you need to consider everybody equal when you communicate, right? So because Dr. Schultz is a leader in his own world, and then is the leader of the team, right? Of their two-man team. But even then, he considers him, even before then, actually, he considers him as being equal, and respects him, and talks to him like he wants to teach him and mentor him, not because there was initially such a big difference between apparently what Dr. Schultz knew and his wealth of cultural information and knowledge, and Django he didn't have the chance to do all that, but he, regardless, he respectfully offered information and explained everything very clearly, and what's expected from him, what he can offer, like these are important leadership qualities, right? To be able to clearly explain your goal, what you're going to do, how do you want to do it, if there is a negotiation or transaction, what are you offering? What are you expecting in return, and all that. So I think all this, you can see that from the beginning, like from the first scene, you can see that Dr. Schultz has all that going.
Absolutely. I think that the two standout kind of overarching leadership messages that I took away were, one was that kind of mentoring and development, and the kind of how you support an employee or work with somebody. So there's that relationship going on between Django and Schultz. And then there's the other side of just kind of how you do business and how you go in those kind of ways of how he conducts himself in business and how he thinks and processes things. So those are the two big things that I took away. The with the mentoring, what I thought was interesting was so then moving forward just a little bit, he's now basically, he's now in a sense freed Django, and he's taking Django, and he's now kind of proposed this partnership or this agreement that they have. But one of the things that stood out to me, which is I think so important when you're building a relationship and that somebody you're going to work with or somebody that you're supporting, managing and mentoring, is he built rapport. And we talk, that's something we always talk about. It's important to build rapport with your staff or your employees. And one of the neat ways he did it, and I've always been a fan of this, is he got Django thinking and talking about, what is he gonna do? What's your goal, right? He asks him basically, you're gonna walk away with $75 in your pocket, a horse, and you'll be a free man after this exchange, after this thing we're gonna do. What's your goal? What's your next steps? What are you gonna do? I love to, when I'm trying to build with somebody, I love to ask them things like, what's your plan here at this, your career plans here at this company? What's your kind of 5-year plan? What's your life goals? However it's going to be. So I love that rapport building that he did right off the bat. And then of course he uncovered all kinds of very interesting things, and that led to a whole nother, excursion and different things that come up.
Indeed, I think the mentorship part is very obvious. Like, he's transferring all the information that he knows. He teaches him how to shoot, how to how the business goes and everything, as you mentioned. So this is an important part of it, and also in this respect of the business side, a very important point, I think, regarding clarity and how a leader should express himself clearly in everything, is about the contracting. So like, there are several episodes in the movie where you can see like how he clearly contracts, and explains exactly how it's going to happen, and all the terms of the contract, and that's very interesting. On the other hand, as you mentioned, like beyond the mentorship, he acts sometimes even as a coach. So he's poking and supporting Django to answer to some questions himself, and think about the future, and that's a coaching perspective. So I find that very interesting to see him both as a mentor, how he tries to help, and he is helping Django all the way. And one more thing I would like to add about Dr. Schultz's character, I think you can see from the beginning he's also like an iconoclast, someone who really challenges the status quo. So from the beginning, he challenges everything that the white people from the South believe about slavery and everything, right? The first thing, the slave on the horse, right? Like, nobody saw that before. And he was just like not giving a shit. Okay. Yeah. So I think also as a leader, being this challenger and not obeying the rules just because they exist, but challenging them in this specific case is obviously that enslaving black people is not right. So he was challenging that from the beginning.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, obviously Tarantino's a genius in that whole entertainment of it, but it really shows how that we should be, as a society and as a leader, challenging these kind of things that we don't think is right, and how we should treat people. So I agree. And you said too about the contracts. There was also that, and this kind of goes along with it, but in the importance of when you have a partnership or you're working with anybody, is ensuring that expectations are clear. And this is kind of what you were saying, with the whole, like, what to expect, what we're going to do, what each person's role is when we go into this thing. And so it's so important to, when you have a mentor or just somebody you're working with, to make sure that goals are set and it's clear, those expectations are clear on what we're trying to achieve together. So I love that too, is just as far as this ongoing kind of leadership, and you see that throughout. And again, he's that on the other side. So there's that mentoring side, and then there's that whole business side of things too. And he was exact on both of those things. He was really stuck to it, and I think it's so important. So not only with kind of his employee, if you will, but also his clients or the people.
Exactly. And maybe paradoxically, if we fast forward just a bit, you see the scene when, after they went to Don Johnson estate and they killed the three criminals, and after that they were expecting, obviously Dr. Schultz was expecting a retaliation from them, right, with a carriage filled with dynamite. But I think it's very interesting if you analyze the scene just before they tried to attack them, when they were arguing about the bags on the head and about the fact that they couldn't see because they weren't properly made. And I think that's a very interesting perspective, if you see the two sides, right? This team, Dr. Schultz and Django, clearly communicating and agreeing and moving forward smoothly and openly, and the other team, let's say, they couldn't understand each other. Their goals were not clearly executed, right? They couldn't even cut right holes in the and you can see, like, they were not like a real team, right? They're pointing fingers, right? This is what a bad team does. Like, the leadership was so bad there, like so you can see the two perspective is very interesting. They couldn't get along, and after all, because of that, right, most of it, they died because they couldn't execute the plan properly and the leadership was bad.
That's a brilliant point. It was just a funny scene to me. I didn't really pick up on that whole aspect, but the contrast there is unique, especially when the main kind of leader, slave master, they're all sharing their dissatisfaction with the bags and how they can't see and how this isn't a good idea. And still he's like, you know what, I don't care. This is what we're doing. I'm the leader. Let's go forward. And, ultimately didn't end well for them. So yeah, great contrast there for sure. This is just something I picked up on more. And I will say, as a leader, and especially as somebody who's been in a leadership role and really understood the power of servant leadership and the significance of that, and being able to see those contrasts. Now, this is an extreme, but they showed multiple times where Schultz and Django are moving past a group of slaves, essentially, and these people who are treated poorly. And there was a clear bit of empathy that you could sense from Django and Schultz, although they knew that they really couldn't change that situation for those individuals. There was clearly that empathy. And I will say, this is just an interesting touching things for me when I'm thinking about it from a leadership perspective is that, you often, I have often as a leader, I'll have conversations with friends or family or whoever, and they're, have a concern about their work and their work environment. And oftentimes the answer the conclusion that I come to is that it's just, there's poor leadership there at their work. There's some sort of challenge that the leadership just don't have the knowledge, or they're not focusing on what's really, again, employing servant leadership. So it's that that empathy then that I start to feel for those individuals. Again, not comparing somebody at a bad work environment versus slavery, obviously, but there's that still that empathy then further drives me in a sense to be a better leader, or to remind me of the fact of what's my purpose and that kind of thing too. So I saw that it was it was very subtle, but it continually kind of happened, and you could tell that was then driving Django and Schultz to this kind of higher purpose, which ultimately then, ends in this big kind of war at the end.
Yeah. And I also want to bring up Steven, because I think he's a very interesting character.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that he's Samuel L. Jackson, another huge actor and Tarantino favorite, right?
Yeah.
But like, his role is very interesting when you look at it from the leadership perspective, because he's also a leader. He's
Right.
black, so he was an ex-slave. He was not really a slave anymore, even though technically he was, but you could see, like, in the scenes who are not in public, that when he was drinking with Calvin, right, and they were talking like equals, and
Right.
you could see that. So it was just an apparent role for him in front of the other black slaves, so that they wouldn't think that you could be in other position other than a slave. I think it's a very interesting perspective. And what I also think is that he failed as a leader, as a former slave who somehow raised above his level. He failed in inspiring the others to do so, and helping the others to do so.
Right.
So he did it for himself, right? Because you could see clearly that he wasn't at the same level. He was, like, let's say 2 levels up in the management, right, scale. But he failed because he wasn't true to himself, and he didn't inspire the others to raise also from slavery, or he didn't fight at all. He was like, he's given up on this, but he was enjoying his cognac off the record with Calvin. Like, they were equals, but not in front of the others. So I think this is an example, in my opinion, of failed leadership and bad way of giving up on your own people, right? Because he was a former slave and technically still a slave, but he didn't fight for his team, for his people. So I think that's a bad example of leadership, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hence why Django took him out at the end. He let the other slaves go, the 2 ladies, but not Steven.
And also speaks about Dr. Schultz's approach and his perspective as a leader. Even though when they finished the paperwork, so the transaction was done, right? They finally freed Hildy, right? They had the papers, but he somehow, because he knew that there was something so wrong going on with all this discrepancy and the slavery, he couldn't let it go, right? And he again sacrificed himself as a true leader for them to go, first of all, for Django to take over in a way, right? His business and his mission, right? And at the same time, he sacrificed by killing DiCaprio, because by that, you cut the head. Probably he was, the organization would crumble, and at least one big focused slavery node, let's say, it was destroyed by that. So he sacrificed himself.
Yeah. Yeah. With that whole thing too, the the approach, and so not speaking on the, again, there was that mentoring that was going on for Django, but then there was this other how you conduct yourself in business kind of approach. There's obviously, this is an extreme. There's some extremes going on here, and this is not a normal situation. But there was some interesting components to the way Schultz conducted himself, where that I appreciated. Where, he was typically clear, and he had this kind of plan and this foresight and all of this of how this was going to play out. But he also didn't play all his cards, right? He didn't really show all his cards, or show, he kind of, he obviously had something else going on. And I think sometimes, especially when you are trying to change the system, if you will, or make some bigger changes, you have to kind of figure out how to play along. Again, now in this situation, obviously this was an extreme of him pretending as he goes into these plantations, he's pretending to be some slave owner who's wanting to purchase slaves and that kind of thing. And obviously I'm not condoning any of that behavior, but there is an aspect when maybe you don't agree with necessarily all the leadership or that kind of thing. If you're just rebelling down here, you're not, you need to figure out common ground or ways you can connect, and ultimately ways you can get in. Because really, unfortunately, sometimes the only way to change the system is to change within the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult from the outside, especially when you're talking about corporate world and the business world. You have to be a part of that to change. Yes. So you might have to kind of adapt or adjust to get in there, to then ultimately influence change and kind of make things improve the way you'd like to see them improve. That was kind of just an interesting part of leadership that I've seen too, separate again from the whole mentoring and development of Django, but just an interesting aspect when you look at it through the leadership lens too.
Yeah, definitely. That goes along with, again, as a leader. So they both had a mission and a clear goal, but they didn't know all the steps to get there because everything was so unpredictable, right? But as you said, he did what he needed to do, right? He portrayed himself as a slaver. He, did everything to resemble the other ones and to have this sentiment that he belongs to the same kind of mentality.
Right.
But this is what a leader does, right? Adaptation and adjusting and, finding new ways to get to the goal. This is a very, very big part of leadership. You never know exactly all the steps, right? Even if when your goal is so clear and everything is, even when he had this contracting very clear in anything, but he didn't know all the steps, every little situation and turn, like it happened, right? But he, and also Django, Django also adapted.
Yeah.
So he took that from his mentor, and they get along on this.
Yeah. The last thing that I point that I pulled out was particularly at Candyland, and I think that it happened in other places, but really at Candyland, obviously there was emotions were high for Django. He's seeing his wife being treated so terribly, and you see that multiple times where he reaches for his gun and he's about to react and that kind of thing. And even when they're heading up there to the plantation, Schultz has to remind him to kind of think about it, the outcome that he's trying to achieve. Let's focus on this goal and all of that, and not let those emotions get the better of you. And I think that's just that was kind of the last leadership nugget that I really took, was just the importance of focusing on your goal and the outcome, and really thinking about that. And sometimes if it's not you might have to help remind other staff of that importance.
not sacrificing, let's say, the mission and the goal because you have like a sudden burst of feelings and emotions, as he was very entitled to do that. I mean, if you see your wife being treated like that, I mean, it's very hard, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah.
We never know that, but
Right.
it must be like really hard. And this is also important as a leader, right, to hold on and remain calm and try to rationalize things. Don't rush into things to jeopardize the ultimate goal.
Right. Absolutely.
And I also, speaking of high emotions at the Candyland, I want to mention how Steven picked up on their relationship when nobody else did, right?
Yeah.
So again, this is maybe a way of putting him within his own people, right? But he was, because he sensed the relationship, and all the other ones, let's say the white people at the table, they didn't have a clue, right? So you can see like he feels like a traitor on his own people again.
Stephen himself was very fascinating in his character and all of that, and kind of, and you see that, you see that in leadership. People, unfortunately, there are people who do try to get ahead by, being a snake in the grass, backstabber, however you want to call it. I mean, their intention is to get power by basically being a kind of crab in the bucket kind of thing, or squashing others down instead of helping everybody rise up. So absolutely, just another aspect of that, of what people focus on in leadership too. And you see it in everything, certainly in the leadership world, unfortunately.
So one last thing I want to mention, I don't know if you got that, last scene when Django, after he kills everyone, and Stephen was still in there, right? He didn't kill him like the other ones. He somehow wanted to punish him more because he was this traitor, and he wanted to make that count, And there is among the saying, one of the last ones was, you can somehow, I think he said, you can never actually defeat us or the system in a way. And he said Candyland has been here and will always be here. And then Candyland explodes. So I think it's a very interesting perspective, like the old system that really it's a bad system and has slavery and all that bad stuff in it. One of the actual traitors on their own people, right, Stephen, says the system will be here, but Django, actually, the explosion of the house, I think it means no, it's not going to be here, and I'm going to fight for this. So I think it's very interesting how he blew up the house.
Absolutely. I mean, Tarantino's so great at taking this kind of story, this specific story, but he makes it bigger, and there's those symbols and all of that you can see. And absolutely, I mean, that whether that be the start of slavery being abolished or what have you, but it certainly is great kind of comparison, or that kind of ultimate symbol.
It's like a spark if you think about it, right? He put up the spark to ignite the whole abolishment of slavery in a way, the explosion and the dynamite. He blew up the idea of slavery, and one big important part of it was Candyland.
Absolutely, literally blew it up, which is awesome. Man, it's again, you think about Django Unchained, awesome Tarantino flick. Don't really think about all these leadership lessons. It's amazing how many we were able to pull from this movie, even amidst all the violence and blood, and which and just entertaining kind of interactions and extreme situations and all of that. Anyways, great movie.
Yeah, great movie. One of the best Tarantino movies. So thanks everyone for watching. We hope you found interesting the insights that we uncovered from Django, and keep watching us. We're gonna keep publishing at least one video a week from a great movie. So also, if you have any suggestions, please comment on the videos and suggest a new movie if you want to. Thank you all, and thank you, Ian.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, everybody.